This is going to be a tier list for the classes for Diablo Immortal. We're going to be covering the classes by PvE first, then by PvP in order to break it down in the most fair way possible. Let's get going for the Season 7 PvE class tier list, and we're going to be starting with Barbarian. I do believe Barbarian hasn't changed too much in PvE. They did get a couple new legendary items that are right that increases their damage a little bit in PvE, but they still kind of fall prey to the same problem. Don't really have much range. You have to get in there on top of somebody in order to do something. In order to survive, you have to have basically undying range, and things like challenge rifts, etc. can be difficult, and you're basically just frenzying down people, etc. on the bosses. It's good, not great. I think they're somewhere around the T. I don't think they're D in PvE. I don't think they, totally got a big fat. In fact, I don't really think, spoiler, I don't think any of the classes are really a major D in terms of performance on this list. However, I do think Barbarians are going to be near the bottom of the list, currently in the PvE meta, and I'm going to put them right there in C. The only thing that could bump them up from C, in my personal opinion, is if you are with an organizational group where you have things like a monk, a crusader, like a demon hunter, and a barbarian, for instance, where you have all these different classes where they work together. They do have a shout that increases your damage that is actually kind of a staple. So if we're using them for organizational, and let's say at the absolute top of the meta, let's say where you're grouping up with people that know what they're doing, you're communicating, in that case, I think I would bump them up to A. So I think I'll leave them as C for solo, A if you're in a group, and since we're talking about meta, we're going to assume you're in a group, and I will leave them at A for the purposes of this video. Crusader's the next one, and we don't have to spend too long thinking about this one. This one's going to be an S tier currently. The reason I think it's S tier is because, one, the last update gave them a new chest plate, which allows them to increase the damage done on targets, but also they have two moves that are amazing. They have this flame circle that just does a ton of damage for everyone in your party when you're actually near somebody, and then obviously they have the holy banner that gives 100% crit rate for the people in your party, and additional crit chance goes into crit damage, obviously making this a very useful move. Anyone who has a Crusader in your party is going to do more damage than if you do not have a Crusader in your party. And for instance, if you go to the world boss and you're attacking like that world boss that shows up twice that has the DPS chart, if you don't have a Crusader in your party, you're going to lose to the people that do. And so for that reason today, the Crusader is going to be within the S tier for me. Now, the Demon Hunter is an interesting one. I actually want to either put this at A or S tier. I'm going to start with S tier, and we'll talk it out here. The reason for it is a couple reasons. Namely, I do believe that Demon Hunter is extremely fluid when you're in PvE. Things like the overworld farming are very fluid. You can move while you're attacking. I think they do great in challenge rifts. They have really good single target damage. They seem to have only gotten better with the legendary items that have come out. They've been a staple of the DPS for a while. They work way better now with the Reforged bonuses that just happened with the update that allows you to stack those Trimmer procs more and more and more, or even the Vengeance procs more and more and more if you're going to be going that way. And I think Demon Hunter, with the correct gems and the correct build, has some very high ceiling potential on their build. So for today, I think I'm going to leave it at S because in terms of DPS, they're just raw damage and I quite like it, but there could be an argument to drop it down to the A tier. For now, we'll leave it in S as we discuss it. Now, the monks, I think originally in PvE, I got wrong. I think I kind of put them more towards the C tier of things, but I believe they're more in the A tier, and I'm going to break down why. So the barbarian and the monk have something similar, which is they have buffs that increase the damage of the party you are within. So the monk has this aura. They also got this new helmet that just came out with the new legendary update for the items that is going to allow them to slow the movement and attack speed of people within an area, which is going to help a little bit in challenge rifts, but I'm not 100% confirmed that you're going to be using that helmet with some of the other builds, so I have to test it with myself. But they also got a nice update which kind of buffs their basic attack with some of the new legendary items as well, which was one of their weaker points. And I honestly thought they were pretty good in challenge rifts and in PvE just in general. They can farm pretty quick because their basic attack allows them to teleport, but also in challenge rifts they have a lot of stun potential. They have a lot of immunity frames, kind of Street Fighter-esque type of immunity frames, and for that reason I actually not only enjoy playing the monk, but I actually think that a very high skill ceiling of the monk is a potential, and for that reason monk feels like they could both be D tier, but they could also be S tier depending upon who's playing it. I think A is a fairly fair breakdown of where monk is currently. Now, the Necromancer, people have asked me who I thought does the most damage in the game. I believe Necromancer has the most sustained damage burst potential. I think the potential of having the skeletons, skeleton archers, the mages, and the golem all combined with the maggot pants that we've had since basically the beginning of the game. That combination is very difficult to beat, and the only reason you don't see them in the raids getting every single box is because the summons don't count towards the DPS of raid bosses. They do, however, count towards the DPS of the overworld bosses that come twice a day that have that DPS chart. And trust me, you go start paying attention. If you have equal wells, the person who's going to be taking that DPS chart for the equal stats is the Necromancer every time. There's a Necromancer by the name of Pendragon on my server, and every time I'm down there and he's down there, he always takes number 1. I'm only 3k resonance. I just hit 7,000 combat rating. I'm not one of the top on the group, but I'm very easily able to get into the top 3 when even fighting against people with bigger wings than me when they're on other classes. I do believe the Necromancer is a little bit slept on in terms of its damage. I mean, slept on's a little unfair because everyone knows the Necromancer is good, but I don't think people realize how good the actual PvE DPS is because the game itself doesn't really tell you in things like the raids, etc., because it doesn't really count the summons as actual people for some reason. They're sort of second-class citizens. So moving on here to the Wizard. Now, the Wizard is an interesting one for me. I know they're S tier, but I almost want to put them in A tier, and I'm going to make an argument why. I haven't had a chance to test the new legendaries, and there is probably an argument to be made that the CC that they bring to the table and things like challenge drifts can be quite good in PvE. The Crystal is quite good because you can combine it with both the Necromancer mages with the lasers. You can combine it with the Crusader with the mages. Or with the lightning beam there that goes onto the crystal and combos out, etc. We have videos of that combo being showed. So it does pair well with other people. But Wizards are what I would consider a somewhat selfish class, where the only thing they're really contributing is just raw damage, sort of like a Demon Hunter. They don't really seem to provide as much utility as I would hope to see. That doesn't mean they're bad, and they actually could provide more utility now because there's more freezing potential. They have more blizzard and sort of frost mage types of builds. So they have this new helmet that actually blocks projectiles going in and out, kind of like one of the elites has. It's this big purple bubble, and for that reason, it probably is good in PvE defensive-wise. You might notice I have a lot of things stacked in the S tier for PvE, and the A tier is only really the buffers that make the people in the S tier better, and that's because, honestly, in PvE, the classes are what I would consider decently balanced. I would say that if you're just trying to do raw DPS and the only thing you care about is actual raw numbers in terms of damage, it is a little lopsided, but if you actually look at the whole picture and you are willing to consider that what some people offer in PvE is making the other people who shine brighter, then things like the Barbarian Monk are actually quite good and maybe could be dragged up a tier. That's why I have them in A tier, and I don't really today have anything that is necessarily low ranked because I do believe there is a spot for each different class in the game. I think some are better, and there is an argument to be made the Wizard's only in A tier because, and the Barbarian can maybe even be moved up, and it could look like something like this where the Barbarian's S tier and the Demon Hunter's A tier just because it's raw damage, and the Barbarian actually provides this really good damage shout that I haven't really properly given credit for before. But I think for the purposes of this video, it's going to end up looking like something like this for PvE. Now, PvP is where it's going to get a little bit more interesting. Now let's talk about the classes for PvP, and we're going to start with the Crusader this time. The Crusader doesn't really have much to offer in PvP at the moment. I do believe the Crusader, and granted they've been trying to address this with the legendary items, giving them dashes, etc., so you can use Gloom Set, but other than, I mean, again, kind of the Holy Banner, there is a damage immunity casting buff that can be quite good. Crusader doesn't have what you're looking for in PvP, which is a way of dealing significant damage either from range, a way of locking people down with stuns, or a way to defensively keep yourself alive. And I guess they have them immune to damage the one time. But I do believe Crusaders, when I see a Crusader, I very often think to myself, oh, that's the easiest target to kill out of literally anything. As compared to something like the Barbarian, I definitely am going to put an S tier that I did not do before. And the reason for this is the Barbarian provides something that no other class really can do, which is the ability to get in on somebody's face and delay them in terms of timing. Now, in PvP, battlegrounds are basically a time-gated thing. You're trying to defend for as long as possible. Barbarian actually has the ability to help significantly with this because they can get in on top of somebody with the Undying range and just stand there menacingly, and you can shoot them with your last bullet and he can stand there unfazed. And it's a little bit unfortunate because it can be very frustrating to play against. Very often people will consider the team with the most barbarians tends to win in PvP battlegrounds. If I had to pick 8 characters, I would either pick 8 wizards for the BS that is the Frost Mage, or I would absolutely pick 8 barbarians. And you can see this mirrored in your battlegrounds. Start noticing how many barbarians there are, that how often you get annoyed in the battlegrounds. I actually think they're quite good in PvP. I think people sleep a little bit on the grab, etc., but I would have to test that out more myself. And I have seen barbarians that I know personally do quite well in PvP, even when behind in resonance. So I think I have been sleeping on the Barbarian, and for this video, I will be giving Barbarian its props by saying it is a top tier pick in PvP. Now, one more is going to be the Wizard in S tier. Speaking of S tier here, the Wizard, I don't think needs as much explanation. You have the Ice Ray Beam, you have the Crystal, you have the helmet that when you get 6 stacks of the Ice Ray, it freezes the person, and you have things that increase your attack speed that you can get through itemization, which is going to obviously make your character cast those channels faster, get the stacks quicker, and CC faster. Also has some of the longest range, if not the absolute longest range in the game, with the combination of the Crystal and Disintegrate Beam, because Disintegrate has items that give a 20% range increase, etc., which this character absolutely does not need. And so very often you're getting melted by a character you literally can't even see on your screen. For this reason, as well as damage reasons, wizards are absolutely disgusting, and blocking the continual damage of the beam is nigh near impossible. So for me personally, the Wizard is one of the most frustrating and one of the best, if not the best, current PvP class, and they don't seem to be letting the pedal off the gas with this, because they are continually seems to be buffing the Wizard in PvP, or at least giving them more viable options in PvP. And this last update was definitely no coincidence that they decided to give the helmet, which is the strongest PvP one, the next kind of PvP ability with the time slow that actually blocks projectiles, which would be a useful PvP move. That way you don't get that stacked with an already disgusting helmet. So I think they're slowly acknowledging the Wizard is in a state that is ridiculous, and I don't think they're going to nerf it, but I think they'll probably stop buffing it at this point, if I had to say. Now, Necromancer I originally put in the S tier. I'm actually going to drop it down to A tier now. I think that I probably have overrated Necromancer just a little bit in PvP, because I value CC so highly. However, my CC hasn't been doing me very much good when I'm instantly dead by people that have high resonance and high damage. Also, my CC, while it can stop a Barbarian, it won't stop him from wasting my time, which is what a Barbarian's whole point tends to actually be. So I'm negating a little bit of my opinion on the Necromancer based upon the way the actual balance of Battlegrounds works, and you want to waste their time if you're on defense, etc. And the Necromancer also has a problem with summons. I haven't found a way around this, which is that your summons you can't really use in PvP because they get killed pretty much instantly. Also, Necromancer really only has one viable option, which is to be a support type of character, unless you're going with sort of this unique Corpse Lance build where you use Gallowsborn with Vithus and a couple other two-piece two-piece Vithus, 4-piece Grace, I think it is, or it could be the flip-flop of that 4-piece Grace, 2-piece Vithus. You have to excuse me here. Which what it actually does is it keeps your Wraith form up 50% of the time, creating corpses, which you use to use a Corpse Lance nuke. This is a build I've been aware of lately that I have tested out myself. While I don't like that build and much prefer the defensive supportive option of CC, I do believe that I have to recognize Necromancer is probably not on the same tier as Wizard and Barbarian. There's an argument to be made can be better. However, it's weird because I feel some people would disagree with me and say it's on S tier, because you do want to have a Necromancer somewhere in your PvP group at some point. Necromancer is something that you really don't want to not have, because you need the significant amount of CC in order to allow these other people to pop off. But just because of that doesn't mean I want to give it a full S tier at the moment. I think A tier is currently fair. Demon Hunter, I think, is probably an A tier as well. Demon Hunter has consistent medium to long range damage that can be scary and has some really big nuke potential. Some of the quickest I've ever been killed in this game was by a Demon Hunter, whereas the Wizard is like, oh great, I'm getting lasered by another invisible beam from a mile away that I can't even see. The Demon Hunter is, oh, somebody daring swung in and then nuked me in a half a second with this multi-shot basic attack combo. I also think the Tremor procs significantly buffed Demon Hunter with the change that the family bonuses go. I would like to give Demon Hunter an even higher rating, but I think A tier is fair. I don't think I could say Demon Hunter is worse than Necromancer, but I could probably make the argument it's on the same tier. Now, the Monk, while the Monk is pretty good, and I do believe that there's an argument to be made that the Monk could be on the A tier. It does have good CC, and it has a high skill ceiling. It's that same skill ceiling that makes me want to put it in C tier, because while the Monk can perform at the level of the other classes, it takes significantly more to get the Monk there. You both need what I feel like is resonance. In order to get there, you need min-maxed gear, you need the correct knowledge of how to handle the Monk, you need all of these things. Where Necromancer can really just copy paste one of my stun lock type of builds, go up there as a mouth breather, and then just spam the CC and be almost 100% as useful as anybody else. It's a very easy class to play, whereas things like the Monk takes an extreme amount of skill, knowledge, gameplay, right essences, correct build in order to get to the level that the other classes basically start at. I don't think it's fair to say the Monk is as bad as the Crusader, so I'll probably drop the Crusader down one tier, since these two are the only ones within the same tier together. Now, this is just my personal opinion that comes from playing each class, watching the new legendary items come out, seeing my friends play each class, and getting dumped on in PvP by certain classes as well. So it's all subjective, and you're welcome to your own opinions on this. This is just one man's. Consider liking this video or subscribing if this was an interesting conversation, and if you made it to this part of the video, thank you so much for all the subscribers I received on the last video. I got 38 subs in one video. That's the record to beat in this one.